Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani and Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani and Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm film scholar and Mr. Dicey Semantics, Noelle LaCroix.
And I'm story expert and over-the-hill shopkeeper who just needs to die for a minute, Lani and Rich. And we're here today to talk about Bargaining Parts 1 and 2, the first and second episodes of Season 6.
Bargaining Parts 1 and 2 aired on October 2nd, 2001, and thank goodness, really, because cliffhangers are the worst.
The worst.
Part 1 was written by Marty Noxon, Part 2 was written by David Fury, and both were directed by David Grossman.
All right, so those of you who have been with us for a while know that we are a fully spoiled Buffy podcast, but if for some reason you happened upon us in the middle of Season 6 and thought, hey, let me just jump right in, then you should know that we are fully spoiled, and we will talk about anything and everything that has happened in the run of Buffy, so be sure that you have either watched it all or that you don't care before you continue to listen. Oh, poor watcher. Did your life pass before your eyes? Cup of tea, almost got shagged, cup of tea? Well then, let's go on patrol. In Bargaining Part 1, the whole Scooby Gang, including Buffybot, are at the graveyard fighting a vampire. Willow is running the show via telepathy as she watches from atop a crypt. Between the 7 of them, they take out the vamps, but it's a rough fight. And the Buffybot is off her quipping game.
That'll put marzipan in your pie plate, bingo.
Buffybot has a bigger challenge ahead, though, the first day of school when parents are supposed to bring their child in and meet the teachers. While Tara and Willow are now living in the Summers home and raising Dawn, everyone needs to think Buffy's also living there, or they might take Dawn away. Buffybot goes to school and does just fine, though.
I helped make lunch today.
At the Magic Box, Giles is preparing to move back to London, leaving Anya in charge of the store. Anya's on edge, though, because they can't tell Giles the reason why he maybe shouldn't go back to England, and they aren't telling anyone about their engagement. Xander says they should wait until they talk to Willow that night. At the house, Dawn tries to tell Spike that she doesn't need a babysitter, but Spike will not have it.
I'm not leaving you to get hurt.
Out on patrol, Buffybot saves a girl from vampire, but gets hurt in the process with a sparking head injury. The vampire realizes the Slayer is a robot and runs off to tell his friends. Meanwhile, at Xander's, there's a plan underway to bring the real Buffy back, with the ordinary questions that surround that kind of thing. Is this the right thing to do? Will she come back as a zombie and eat our brains? That kind of thing. But Willow says it wasn't a mundane death. The Buffy was killed by mystical energy, and that means they might be able to bring her back. But Willow is determined to bring Buffy back for other reasons.
Her essence. I mean, that could be somewhere else. She could be trapped in some sort of hell dimension like Angel was. Suffering eternal torment just because she saved us, and I'm not going to let her... I'm not going to leave her there.
Buffybot returns home and Willow patches her up. At a demon bar, the vamp tells a bunch of biker gang demons that the Slayer is a robot and they ride off to Sunnydale to take over. Willow gets the last of the ingredients they need for the ritual to bring Buffy back. Everyone gathers at the Magic Box to prep for the big night when they find a note from Giles saying he's gone off to London and didn't want a big goodbye. So they, of course, run off to the airport and make a big to-do about it. Giles gets on the plane. That night, the Scoobies gather at Buffy's gravesite and ask Osiris to let Buffy come back. But Osiris is in no mood for this bullshit, and he slices Willow's arms and sends bugs crawling under her skin. Xander takes this opportunity to once again question what they're doing, but Tara says no. Willow said this would happen, and they have to keep going no matter what, or they'll lose their chance to bring Buffy back. But then...
Oh God, what is that noise?
Yep, it's the biker demon gang who are in town to take it over and turn it into a post-apocalyptic hellscape / demony wonderland as they throw Molotov cocktails through windows, because you don't join a demon biker gang to be all low profile about things. Willow vomits up a snake. That's it. That's the tweet. Spike looks out the window and sees demon bikers and decides to hit the streets with Dawn because they'll surely be safer on the run. At Buffy's gravesite, Osiris continues to give Willow the mystical beatdown when the biker demons come racing through their sacred circle, making a mess of things and busting up the last known urn of Osiris. And this is why we can't have nice things, people. Tara and Anya run one way, and Xander picks up Willow and carries her off in another direction, setting her down once they're out of immediate danger.
It worked.
Sorry.
Yeah, except it did work. And in Buffy's grave, she comes back to life, and there's everyone's worst nightmare, so welcome back, Buffy. Tara and Anya run to the magic box. Xander and Willow wander around the woods in circles until Tara sends a light to lead them home. And Buffy claws her way out of her grave and into a world that she died to save and is now being overrun by demon biker gangs setting everything on fire. And what the actual fuck, people? Meanwhile, at the magic box, everyone assembles, but there's no Giles and no Buffy bot, and they need, well...
Buffy is not coming back. We failed. So, we're it, gang.
Meanwhile, Buffy bot is out on the job, fighting the biker demons, except they know she's a robot. The real Buffy wanders up to warm up by the garbage can fire as they tie Buffy bot's arms and legs to 4 bikes and ride off, ripping her to pieces while actual Buffy watches. Because, you know, she wasn't traumatized enough having to claw her way out of her own grave. But wait, there's more! The demons see the real Buffy standing there in shock and horror and decide there's more fun to be had. Buffy runs and drops down into an alley where the Scooby Gang are walking with their weapons. At first, they think it's the Buffy bot, then they realize it's actually Buffy, and then they see her terrified expression and bloody hands, and Xander realizes what happened.
Our resurrection spell worked like a magic charm. We brought you back to life, Buffy. Right where we left her.
But of course, it gets worse. The biker demons attack and threaten them with rape and death, so I guess they're a demon biker gang / alt-right incel troll group that just came upon a woman with an opinion on the internet. Buffy smacks a few of them down, and the Scoobies join the fight, but in the middle of the melee, Buffy sees the rickety tower that Glory built and runs off, leaving the rest of the Scoobs to finish off the demons. While out on the town, Spike and Dawn find the remains of the Buffy bot, who tells Dawn about the other Buffy before powering down for good. While Spike is distracted collecting pieces of Buffy bot, Dawn realizes that her sister has returned and runs off to find her.
Hey, little bit. Dawn!
Buffy climbs the tower, remembering her own death there months earlier. Dawn climbs up after her and tries to talk to her. The tower wobbles under their weight and Buffy looks over the edge. Dawn shouts to her to not move and explains what happened and asks Buffy to talk to her.
Is this hell?
Dawn says no and tells Buffy that she tried to be strong without Buffy, but she needs Buffy to be brave and stay with her. Just then the tower starts to collapse and Buffy grabs Dawn and jumps off the side of the tower, grabbing a pulley to soften their landing. They run away from the collapsing tower and Dawn cries and hugs Buffy, saying she's home, while Buffy stares over her shoulder, her expression shocked and blank.
All right, Noelle, so here we are in the beginning of season 6, and I have to say, it's kind of a transition. Buffy, of course, has been through some big transitions, going from alive to dead to back to alive again, which is a big thing. But also the show itself is kind of going through some transitions. There's a marked difference between season 5 and season 6, and a lot of it happens because this is when we had the transition from moving Buffy away off of the WB and onto UPN, where it aired for its final 2 seasons. So there is that. I mean, and with some different people running the studio and all that, I'm sure that had some influence influence on it. But also it just seems like Buffy's kind of a different show, that if the seasons 1 through 5 were about growing up, that season 6 and 7 are about, being grown. And how difficult that is. So I'm curious, we talked about season 5, of course, last week when we talked about The Gift. But how do you feel about this transition into season 6? And overall, what do you think about season 6? We are fully spoiled, so it is okay for us to share those opinions, how we felt about season 6 in the past when we've watched it.
So I love the way this opens season 6 as we're sort of back to normal and sort of not. Which feel like, I don't know. I love that it opens just running through the graveyard, but of course it's not Buffy running through the graveyard. It's everyone doing Buffy's job and kind of, finding their own way as this team, this grief-stricken team. But season 6, I don't know. I'm really excited for season 6 this time through. We've been talking all along about each season kind of having a theme, in a way that season 5 was very much about Buffy's identity and her gift, really, her, the sort of spiritual calling aspect of being the Slayer, right? That she's got to grapple with so many life and death situations in her own life in this really, really, in a way that I think is deeper than any season prior. And now in season 6, I feel like we're talking a lot about relationships, and obviously not romantic relationships exclusively, but being grown is a lot about relationships and how we relate to other people and the choices we make because of those relationships. I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of a stretch to say that's what we're doing in season 6, but it feels that way to me right out of the gate. And knowing where a lot of this is going, I'm excited. I don't know. I'm just excited to talk about season 6. I
think it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, I've already run through season 6 critically once, and I think going through things critically always kind of changes my perspective on things. Prior to reading Buffy critically, just enjoying it as a fan, season 6 was always kind of a mixed bag for me. There were a lot of things that I liked about it. There were a lot of things that I didn't particularly care for. But basically, it would go from episode to episode. I like this particular episode. I didn't care for this particular episode, that kind of thing. But season 6 overall, when you think about it in terms of being kind of a different show from the original Buffy, that it's kind of a next, almost like a reboot, Yes. Where we're taking the same setting and the same characters, but we're seeing them in a completely different context. And I think that may be part of the reason why. There are a lot of reasons why I think people didn't like season 6, and I'm definitely not going to tell anybody that they're wrong for not liking it. I didn't care for it much the first couple of times, I watched the whole thing through. But when I started looking at it critically, when I started thinking about it and thinking about the things that they're doing in season 6, I find it really super interesting. The first 5 seasons of Buffy, like we talked about growing up, about becoming, right? And seasons 6 and 7, I think, are about being, which is a lot harder, right? The hardest thing in this world is to live in it, right? That realization for Buffy is a turning point, and she chooses to check out, right? And then she is dragged back, And I find that a really interesting kind of thing, coming of age tales we tend to think about in terms of a young person has sex for the first time or falls in love for the first time, right? And then that is suddenly the coming of age. But real coming of age is about that loss of innocence where you don't have to think about all of the consequences of everything that you do. You don't have to feel so responsible for everything that you do, that you don't have to engage in the world in a way where the things that you do have these deep impacts on other people and in those relationships, like what you were talking about. So I think that Buffy's Buffy's choice at the end of season 5 to die, you know, to save everybody else and to end that fight that she was in, because she was constantly in this state of becoming, right? You know, throughout the first part of the series. And then she finally becomes, and then she jumps into this big mystical hole, right? You know, and that is a coming of age thing. And then here she is back, you know, from that experience, and everything is different. And she is fundamentally different, and we're going to see a lot of those differences coming out during this season. But I think that that's kind of the fun part of watching season 6 is that transition, that different lens through which we are looking at Buffy and through which we're looking at Sunnydale. Like, everything is different now, you know? But before we get into that, overall, you enjoyed the opening for season 6. You liked the episodes, bargaining parts 1 and 2?
I do. There are some pacing issues for me. But other than that, I think it's it's such an interesting way to open the season, because of course we know that Buffy is not going to stay gone, right? I mean, yeah. Sarah Michelle Gellar is still here, and as much as I love her as the Buffy bot,
yes, that is a temporary situation. We can't tell a whole story about the bot, right?
Yeah, this is not going to become a story about you know, Buffy bot and her
about a robot
group of
that
human
found its
friends.
soul, right? Exactly.
You know, like, we know that Buffy is coming back somehow, but I really dig this season opener, and I'm glad that we're talking about the episodes together.
Yeah.
Because, oh boy, like, we really go on a journey here.
Yeah. Yeah, we really, really do.
We really go on a journey.
It is one story. I mean, between them, they have that cliffhanger bullshit in the middle, you know, when suddenly we see Buffy brought back to life in her coffin, you know, and that's the kind of thing that you could not. Like, that would have been terrible to spread that over 2 weeks. So it was good that they showed it all together. I think that it is one story. One of the things that I find, I think the difference that I found most kind of glaring in this episode is how freaking dark it is. Like, the nature of the demons is just different now. We go from a goofy vampire conflict, right, where the Buffy bot gets damaged and starts walking into the wall, you know, to these, like, leather-faced biker demons who threaten to rape the Scoobies with anatomies that tend to tear up little girls. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This biker gang of demons is fantastic character design.
Yeah.
And a fantastic entry into the new, like, what the new Hellmouth is going to be.
Yeah, the things that we see now in these demons. Like, if you're thinking about this from the perspective of Buffy and her friends, right? That previously, when we saw demons, they were alien, they had weird, like, we didn't understand them, you know, they were just weird. They were giant snakes, they were reptile boy, right? And they were funny and made of some kind of weird rubber, and they always looked like, you know, super not human. Except for vampires, right? Vampires were always, like, had that human element to them, but that darkness underneath, you know? But the rest of the demons were always kind of, like, you know, just weird looking or whatever, right? So now we have these demons that have this human element to them, but they are markedly inhuman, not animalistic the way that our snake demons and that kind of thing are, but, like, really human but not human, really human but super dark, sharp teeth, right? A discussion of their anatomy, which is terrifying, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, threatening to rape. Like, I don't think we have had a textual rape threat like that you know?
Not like that.
Not like that. We've had assault in a couple of different circumstances, but nothing like that. Like that was super, super dark, you know? And the thing that I find interesting is that we open with this goofy, nerdy vampire wearing a Hanson t-shirt, right? You know?
Yes.
Who like, oh, the Slayer's a robot, right? That nerdy vampire goes into a demon bar, tells the other demons that the Slayer is a robot, and then for his trouble gets beheaded by this guy, which I think is like very clearly and textually telling us that we're not in Kansas anymore. Like this is a different world, and the demons and the dangers that we face are different, you know, and that Buffy and Willow and everybody can see the demons for what they are, as opposed to just these scary nightmare, you know, things, these nightmare monsters, you know. They are very, very dark, but human coded. Like they are within human, you know? So I find that really, really interesting. And, you know, I've talked a lot throughout, you know, Still Pretty about the trauma erasure that we see with Buffy. But season 6 is really all about Buffy's trauma. We see season 6 through the lens of Buffy's trauma, with the exception of maybe some things that happen toward the end. We'll talk about that when we get there. When it's Spike inflicting the trauma, we let it go a little bit too easy. But anyway, we'll get there later. But I think that for me, we have these like really horrible dark demons, but the big bad for season 6, we haven't seen them in this episode. We won't see them, you know, until I think the next episode or the episode after that, is the trio, right? You know, these bad, stupid men, right? You know, misogyny, which is Warren, internalized homophobia, which is Andrew, and empowered weakness, which is Jonathan, who do so much damage just through pure ignorance and entitlement. And I find that so interesting. Of course, we're going to talk about that, you know, at length throughout this season. But I think season 6 is doing a thing, and I find it really interesting. I get why some people don't like it. And there are parts of it that I don't particularly care for, but I respect the hell out of it. And I love Marty Noxon, and I love talking about this season. I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting too that we get this very scary male biker gang showing up in an episode where Giles is leaving. Like there's something that we're doing something about masculinity in this season for sure.
Yeah.
In, you know, some big ways and in some little ways. But I think this is the first time that Anthony Stewart Head is no longer in the opening credits. He's now a guest star.
Yeah.
Which is another big, like, almost metatextual shift in the feel of the show. Like, the adults are gone. Yep. And now the core cast
are
the adults.
Yeah.
And we're in a different, like, we're in a different world in that the cast is configured differently. Does that make sense?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Who is positioned as, you know, the authority is different. And yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot in season 6 about scary men, like in a way that we've both done before on the show, and I think not fully explored. But that is definitely something that I'm going to watch for on this run through, because it's not, season 6 is doing a thing.
Season 6 is doing a thing. And the scary big bad is not, you know, the it's not some demon, it's not some god, it's not something that is other. It's humans, you know, humans with souls. And I love that we're doing that. I love that we're looking at this, you know, from that perspective and seeing the damage that can be done, you know, sometimes through just ignorance, sometimes through, you know, like that ignorance, that entitlement, you know, that Andrew and Jonathan, I don't see as necessarily evil at their core. They're just not good enough, to like stop the evil. And Warren is absolute, personified misogyny. But those are going to be really, really fun discussions to have when we get there. Right now, working through bargaining, right? Bargaining actually, as everybody has picked up, I'm sure, is named for the third, stage, although, of course, these stages are not necessarily linear. You pop back and forth between them throughout the process of grief. But the third stage of grief, as laid out by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. The 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, right? So bargaining is the stage where we think about what we might have done to prevent the terrible thing from happening. What if I'd done this differently? Would it have changed things? We're going to see Spike next week firmly in Afterlife when he tells Buffy that every night he saves her, he does something different, faster, better. Every night he saves her. That is a typical kind of expression of bargaining in the grief process. And Dawn was bargaining in Forever when she tried to bring Joyce back, right? You're trying to undo it, So in bargaining, we get to this what if stage of grief, with a character there who actually has the power to change it. Right?
Yeah.
The thing about what if in the grief process is if I had done this differently, if this had been different, if I had, all of these things like what if, is that you can't go back and change it. Those are questions that you ask before you move into your real sadness and your depression about it. According to Kubler-Ross, of course, these are, stages that you bounce back and forth. But it's where you go during that particular part of that process. But we all go there without having the ability to change it, without having the ability to undo it. For the most part, usually without having the ability to undo it. But Willow does have that power. And if you think about it, like imagine all the things that you would undo if you could, the things that happen, like what if you'd had the power to reverse like terrible things that had happened, and in the throes of grief, I think that we would all do that. But as our very powerlessness to change these things, the finality of our lives and our existences that give our life meaning, but Willow can just undo it. I mean, yeah, they got to go get an urn of Osiris and she's got to kill a deer and there's all that kind of stuff, and have bugs crawling under her skin and Osiris beating the hell out of her. But I mean, the thing is she has the power to do it. And her arc this season is about what that kind of power will do to you if you let it run unchecked. So I find that really interesting.
I mean, it's not really a secret at this point that Willow is my favorite character on the show. And all of her arcs are so fascinating to me.
Yeah. And
season 6, I mean, we really like jump right into it with Willow and kind of, where she is now in bargaining parts 1 and 2 is so, I don't know, just like emblematic of like what is going to happen to her as we move forward.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it. I love the way we just jump right into exploring Willow's power and kind of all of the nuance of that. I mean, opening the season with Willow communicating with everyone telepathically simultaneously is pretty, it's pretty cool. It's shot in this way though that is a little bit unnerving.
Yeah.
Like her facial expression and her body language as she's like perched up on top of the what is it? The mausoleum.
Yeah.
Is like she's stiff and stern, which is I think partly seriousness, but there's something not, this is not like our bright, shiny, brightly colored Willow anymore.
Yeah.
It's a little bit creepy. And even Anya says, she's Willow's communicating with everyone telepathically, and Anya says, it's kind of intrusive. Could you knock first?
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, just the implication of being able to communicate telepathically with all of your friends.
Yeah.
What? Like, there's what, we know that Willow can go into people's minds. We know that Willow has all of this magical ability just kind of kicking around.
Yeah.
And we're starting to inch into what happens when you have that much power.
Mm-hmm.
It's Willow. It really is Willow who's spearheading the Buffy Resurrection Project, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, who made you the boss? Well, you did. And you made a plaque.
Did.
And like all of that. Yeah. Like Willow is the boss of us. Yes.
I love that whole little run, that little Knoxonian, nugget of delight that is,
Knoxonian nugget of delight.
It's great. It made a little sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's Willow who's in charge of this whole project, and it's based on the assumption that Buffy's soul is somewhere terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Buffy's been dead for 5 months, and I wonder if Willow just skipped the research step of trying to figure out where Buffy's soul might have gone to.
Oh, she doesn't want to know.
Like, it's presented as this big, mystery, like it's not a natural death. She could be anywhere. She could be in torment. And I don't know, just tiny little red flag goes up for me of couldn't we figure that out? Like, if somebody, or, couldn't Giles or someone maybe, is there a book that would point us in the vague direction of where the Slayer's essence might have gone after leaping into a magical portal? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. But there's definitely some missing research here. And at Xander's apartment, Willow and Tara treat this like bringing Buffy back is an obvious solution to a problem. And it's Xander who puts on the brakes. Yeah. And he says, that is deep stuff, Willow. And there have been several conversations, both in world and on podcast, about raising the dead.
Yeah.
And the desire to try that is always framed as both a natural response to grief and also a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad idea.
Yeah.
But this time, it seems like a done deal. I mean, Tara says it's against the laws of nature and practically impossible to do, but it's what we all agreed to. And that's the record scratch moment for me.
Yeah.
Like, for real? Tara agreed to this?
Oh, yeah.
Tara, who a few episodes ago was trying to help Dawn over the gaping chasm of the loss of her mother by discouraging even looking into the history of resurrection spells. I mean...
Yeah, but Tara's also sleeping with Willow. Yep. Like, they are intimately, and I mean, I'm not saying this, but I'm saying that when you are with someone, you're partnered with someone, right? And that person is there telling you every day, Buffy we can do this. Buffy's in a torment, in a dimension, in a hell dimension. You can get convinced of things. I can completely see Willow convincing Tara that this is the thing to do. And Tara saying, okay, these are the considerations. It's super dangerous and against the laws, of nature, which is kind of a big deal, right? But it's what we all agreed to, right? So Tara signed on knowing that, it's wrong and that it's going to be difficult, but also that, Tara, as someone who studies magic, I imagine that there's a reason why these spells exist. I mean, basically they exist because people with power had to deal with grief and didn't wanna, but also that maybe there is the exception that proves the rule. Maybe there is when Buffy was killed by mystical energy, not by a mundane force, that changes things. And maybe if she was killed, maybe she dove into this interdimensional space that was connected with hell, with a hellscape. Maybe that's where she is. I mean, it's not unreasonable that this would occur to Willow, that maybe that's where Buffy is. Now, is there a spell that can kind of GPS that shit and figure out where Buffy is? Maybe. Did Willow want that spell? No. She wants
probably
the excuse.
Not.
She's looking for the excuse to bring Buffy back because she does not want to process her grief. Which, by the way, I understand. Grief sucks. In the middle of grief,
totally.
Any of us with the power to change it would probably choose to do so, but that doesn't make it the right choice, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that for Willow, she is so convinced, you know, and is so like, you know, like drinking her own Kool-Aid at this point, that I think she is completely convinced. And I think that she has convinced Tara. And I can definitely understand that, you know, when you're intimately partnered with someone, it's kind of a ride or die thing, right? Willow is going to do this with or without Tara. Tara probably knows that. So Tara's going to be there to protect Willow and do what she can to make sure that it doesn't go bad, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like Tara's pivot on this like little bit of a character break for Tara is really also about the growing imbalance of power in the Willow-Tara relationship. We've heard lots of times from Tara about how powerful Willow is. Yeah. And how much more powerful than Tara Willow is.
And how sometimes it frightens her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And we also know that Willow has lied to Tara before in a resurrecting the dead situation.
Yep.
You know, the lie of omission when Dawn takes the History of Witchcraft book that Willow magically tipped her off to. And Tara asks what happened to it.
Yeah.
And we get another more interesting, to me anyway, lie here about the Vino de Madre.
Yeah.
You know, Willow alone by the river, all in white, is one of my favorite aesthetic moments of this pair of episodes. And I just want to give it up again for Allison Hannigan. The subtlety of this moment is incredible.
Yeah, she's real good.
After Willow stabs the fawn, she continues the ritual without missing a word, but you can see her fighting down the horror, disgust, and maybe some shame.
Yeah.
They've got her in tight close up and her eyes just dart left and right like she's looking around for someone to catch her, even as she's continuing to do this thing.
Yeah.
And then she returns to the magic box in a new blood-free but still red outfit, interestingly.
Yeah.
And she says she got the ingredient on the black market. When Tara expresses concern over her going somewhere dangerous by herself, she shrugs it off.
Right.
And she also just gives a literal translation of the ingredient, wine of the mother, which feels a little half-truthful, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she doesn't say what it is, you know, and she doesn't say what she had to do.
So we've heard Tara telling Xander and Anya, like, look, this is what we all agreed to do. This moment really raises the question for me as to whether Tara would have supported this ritual if she'd known the details.
Well, and the fact that like Willow is, you know, downplaying what she has to do to make this ritual happen would indicate to me that that's probably not the only details she has downplayed to try to get Tara on board. So a lot of this is, you know, manipulation from Willow, not being entirely honest with Tara. And that is not a good sign for that relationship.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. And then we get to the ritual itself, which is brutal. Yeah. I mean, as well it should be.
It needs to be. This can't be a ride at Disneyland. This is serious business. Yeah.
No, I mean, Osiris is a god with a lot of powerful mythology associated with him, and this is neither a mythology podcast nor my area of expertise.
Right.
So I'm not going to dive super deep into the specific invocation of this god, but the death and rebirth themes are real strong. Willow purging the snake is another one of my favorite aesthetic moments. I mean, you all know how I feel about body horror at this point. But I also love it as emblematic of just how powerful a witch Willow has become. A symbol of birth and regeneration literally comes from within her, which is kind of staggering. But also the act of vomiting something symbolizes energy flowing in the wrong direction. So we're foreshadowing some like big evil adjacent, perhaps.
Yeah.
Forces connected to the kind of powerful magic that Willow has, and it's so good. It's so good. I love a powerful visual shorthand for what's going on.
See, now I hate the snake vomiting thing, but then again, of course, as you know, I hate body horror. Like, all of it makes me really uncomfortable and I don't like it. But I appreciate like the symbolism of it and how important it is for Willow to be going through, you know, these trials to earn the right to ask the question, you know?
Yeah. And it should be physically grueling, and she should be able to tolerate it. If we're building Willow up to be as powerful as she is.
Yeah.
Like, that part is really, really important. And as draining as the ritual is for Willow, physically and emotionally, she recovers within the narrative arc of these 2 episodes to the point that she's able to stand up to Razor at the end of part 2.
Right.
It's really, like, it's really, really noteworthy. I mean, at the magic box, when they've made it out of the woods, Anya mentions that Willow is looking a little magicked out. And she is, but then she snaps to almost immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, not only is she getting more powerful, she's also getting more resilient, which means that the wait time between magical decisions becomes smaller.
Yeah.
And that has all kinds of implications for magical decision making going forward.
Yeah.
If spellcasting, I mean, even like big magic spellcasting, doesn't drain you completely, the temptation to magic your problems away increases.
Yeah.
So Willow is building up a tolerance both for the magic itself and also for the unpleasantness that comes with it.
Right. The cost, you know, the cost to her for her magic isn't where she expects the cost to be. Right. It comes in her personal relationships. It comes in her life. It comes in her mundane existence. Right. But her magical existence, like, she can bounce, you know, she bounces back from this whole thing. They're sitting there. Anya's going through that whole thing. You're magicked out. And Willow's like, look, Buffy's not coming back. We got to do this. Next thing we know, Willow is wandering through an alley while demons are just taking over the town with a crossbow. Like, she is not fucking around. The crossbow is one thing because that's like a physical thing that she's carrying around. But later on in the fight, she throws like a goober ball at one of the guy's faces, you know, like a magical goober ball, and manages to like slow him down a little bit, throwing that magic around. And she's able to do that. I mean, that's a big thing. The fact that she can recover, the fact that she can pick up and keep going, even after what she'd been through with Osiris. I mean, Osiris was not gentle with her, you know? And in the beginning, she couldn't walk. Xander had to carry her out. She passed out, you know?
Yeah.
But then once they got back to the magic box, she rested for a few minutes and she was ready to go. And that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yep. Willow is making all kinds of magical strides, and it's affecting her physical self.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's going to become, I mean, that will continue to become important.
It's a huge part of season 6. And season 6 also, you know, like everything in Buffy, it always at some point becomes about power, and her power being magical, and then the trio's power being patriarchal for the most part, I guess.
Yeah.
They've got magical, they've got, you know, the demon summoning, they've got all of that kind of stuff, and also Warren's, you know, pseudo magical technology, whatever. So I mean, they've got stuff that they're doing that is not entirely mundane, but they themselves are mundane. Whereas Willow is bringing that magic, you know, into her. So yeah, it's really interesting. But we're not getting to the trio quite yet, although obviously I'm very anxious to talk about them because I think they're going to be so much fun. But one of the things that we were talking about earlier is this idea. Giles is leaving, right? Giles has been the adult. Giles has been the parent. And now we are seeing everybody stepping into these adult roles. Like we have the engagement between Anya and Xander, right? And Anya's like, why can't we tell everybody? And Xander's like, not the time yet, you know? And so they're going through that whole argument, right? And we have Tara and Willow, who are just, you know, raising a teenager.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
Season 6, Willow and Tara have moved into the Summers home, have moved into Joyce's bedroom specifically.
Yes.
And are co-parenting Dawn.
Yeah.
And I am fascinated to realize that the only co-parenting we see on this show is in the context of a queer relationship.
Yep. All single parents. Well, except I guess technically Xander's parents are co-parenting, but are they really?
I mean, are they
really? They're co-abusing. So there is that. But yeah, like the only functional co-parenting that we see, everybody else is single parenting, just getting along the best they can. I mean, even Giles and Joyce, they do parent Buffy separately in separate contexts, you know. The only time they parent her together is during band candy. But that's a whole other discussion of that's the stuff that it was brief, but it was lovely. But yeah, like the only functional co-parenting we get is this queer relationship, which I think is kind of nice. And it's very normalizing, which I really like, you know?
And it speaks really powerfully again to chosen family and the way that for a lot of queer people, our family units are these things that are like cobbled together, where there are, you know, people who are sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles and children who may belong to us biologically or not.
Right.
And we somehow magically managed to have a household. Like there is something just so fascinating to me about the seamlessness with which we enter into Willow and Tara and Buffy Bot and Dawn as this family getting ready for back to school.
As a family unit.
As a family unit. And it's not anything that we bat an eye at. It's just, this is how we do.
And nobody made a Dawn has two mommies joke. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, right?
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, weird Uncle Xander, but whatever.
Weird Uncle Xander. Weird Uncle Spike. Like, okay, Spike.
Yeah,
also,
super weird Uncle Spike.
Spike is also part of this whole thing. He's part of the family.
Yeah. And I love Spike wanting to be both Dawn's friend and her guardian in this way that like he clearly, like there's clearly an internal struggle for him because he's, you know, she's saying something about school and he's like, yeah, pointless, you know.
Create a bunch of automatons, which is important.
And then he realizes
go.
what he said and is like, and you should definitely go.
Yeah, because
it's
Buffy
very
would
cute.
want her to. Like, that's the thing, you know. But he's there. He's taking care of her. He's playing cards with her. He is in a family relationship, you know. And I mean, the thing is that like these family relationships are still real. And family relationships, even though there's no blood, you know, there's no blood connection between Willow and Tara and Dawn. There's no blood connection between Spike and Dawn. But the family unit is real and it is functioning. I mean, it's vampires and lesbians and teenagers, oh my, and Buffy bots, right? But they're all working together as a family, as a functional family unit, which I like the way they pull that together. I like that sense of all of this is has happened and they're pulling together. They're turning toward each other rather than away.
It's fascinating to me that a show with so many troubling depictions of parents just so seamlessly and almost naturally includes this lesbian couple doing their best to raise their friend's sister.
Yeah.
I love it. I love how like low key it is and how normal everything is around the Summers house with the missing clog and Dawn talking through brushing her teeth and they're making pancakes and having the kind of uncomfortable discussion about, oh well, if Dawn's father figures out Buffy is gone, what's going to happen with that? It's great. It's these little like familial moments that I just so appreciate seeing.
With Tara making pancakes, do you want funny shapes or rounds? I mean, come on, Tara is 20, And I mean, that's the thing. Like Tara and Willow are 20 years old together raising a kid. Like the fact that they're lesbians does not concern me. The fact that they are children, they're 20, which, granted is adults, they are adults. And even though they're 20, which should be this transitional space where you're in college, it's between childhood and adulthood, not necessarily full on adulthood. They are taking on this responsibility and doing a great job. I mean, being good co-parents and creating a family space for Dawn. I absolutely love that they're doing that. And I think that that's great. It is sad to see Giles go. I love Giles, but I think I like that he left this space so that they could fill it, Yeah.
And he's clearly doing his own kind of complicated grief process. Yeah. Training with the Buffy bot and trying to encourage her to breathe.
Oh, God, it's so sweet. It's so heartbreaking and so sweet.
And the Buffy bot saying that she enjoys their training is very interesting to me, too. Like, the Buffy bot herself has gone on a little journey here. But everyone.
She's still saying, vampires beware. And I love it.
It's great. Yeah. It's great. But Giles is clearly grappling with what does it mean? Like, did I fail Buffy by allowing her to die, which is an interesting way of arranging that situation for himself. But he's clearly trying to create some space for himself to process everything that's happened by leaving. Right. And obviously it does create this space for the Scoobies to then like take over as adults. I mean, Anya literally gets to take over the store, which she's very excited about. But there's there's almost a bargaining in Giles's departure as well. Like, if I go back to England, maybe it'll hurt I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
I think
it's all very like quiet and under the surface because of course it is with Giles.
Right. But I mean, there's nothing keeping him there. Buffy's gone. But I do love this moment though, where they're all coming in to say goodbye. I love Tara being like, grr, arg, with the little monster on her finger. That's so cute. And then the sweetness with, Dawn giving him the card and all of that and like everything. But there's this moment with Willow. It's very much the Dorothy and the Scarecrow moment where Scarecrow, I think I'm going to miss you most of all, There is something about the Willow and Giles relationship that is, I think has always been less, father and child, the way that the Buffy relationship was, and more colleagues, more peers, He would turn to her to do the spells, and she knew the things that he knew. Like, he had studied all the magic and all of that and was able to do that. But then he passed that on to her. She took over that responsibility. And at some point, they became more equals than a parent-child relationship. And the way that he is about leaving her and how difficult you can see that is for him, especially because we're going to see him come back and call her a rank, arrogant amateur, which is awesome. And I'm looking forward to that. That's great in that relationship. But I love that little nuance to the way that they are with each other, that it's just different. It's different from him and Xander, from him and Anya, from him and Buffy, from him and Tara. It's just, there's something, and Dawn, there's just something about Willow that is more of a colleague kind of relationship.
It's a surprisingly emotional scene.
Yeah.
For what it is. It's not played up in a huge way. It's not a big, like, I don't know. There are goodbye scenes that have been kind of overstuffed with emotion. Right. And this is
very reserved. It's very reserved and British, right?
very stiff reserved, upper lippy.
Reserved British goodbye. But yet that moment, I think that's why that moment, that very like subtle moment of I'm going to miss you most of all, Scarecrow, like that.
Yeah.
That I think says so much, because it is so much more expressive than usually you would get from Giles. And it's, and I like where he says, I didn't want a scene. And they were like, oh, did you think we'd make a scene? And he was like, no, I was talking about me.
Yeah.
That he left that way so that he wouldn't feel this, that he wouldn't feel, the leaving of them the way as deeply as he clearly does. But yeah, it's a very sad moment, it's a very sad goodbye. And yeah, it's I think it's important for Giles to leave, but it's also, like my heart breaks a little bit when I see him go, because you don't want him to, but it's important that we have that, because right now we're in that transition to adulthood, and a parent figure, softens that, which is what we're going to be seeing, of course, later on in the season with Giles, where, am I being here? Is that making it easier for Buffy to lean on me and not grow up the way that she needs to? And that's a challenge that he, faces later in the season. But I also love, as we move forward in this relationship with Dawn and Buffy, the relationship, first we see it expressed through Dawn and the Buffy bot. When the Buffy bot comes over and hugs her that morning before, you're my sister, right? Oh my God. And Dawn's face, but yet when Buffy is plugged in, Buffy bot is plugged in and charging overnight, Dawn goes into the bedroom and curls up next to her.
Yeah. The uncanny valleyness of the Buffy bot lying in Buffy's bed, plugged in with her eyes open.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
It is so sad. And the thing is that that's like when Buffy bot hugs Dawn, it's very clear it's not Buffy. But when the Buffy bot is shut down, and just lying there, Dawn can pretend for a moment that it's Buffy, and it's so sad and it's so heartbreaking. And then we have, the moment where she's talking to the Buffy bot after the Buffy bot has been drawn and quartered by, which also freaking horrifying, and hello darkness again with these demons, right?
Yeah.
She goes to the Buffy bot, and the Buffy bot says the other Buffy, and says that I was here, and Dawn runs off to look for Buffy, knowing that Buffy is there, follows, Buffy up to the rickety tower, the multi-dimensional diving board that Glory made. And they stand up there on this rickety, wobbly thing that is falling apart and cannot hold them, right? And this conversation that they have is so heartbreaking when Dawn is like, no, don't, and I've tried to be brave, and I've tried to live. And then she starts telling Buffy what Buffy said to her: live, be brave, live. And Dawn is about to say, for me, when the whole thing starts falling apart. And that's the moment when Buffy kind of comes back And then, of course, saves them both by softening their fall somewhat by grabbing on this pulley that then, of course, brings the whole thing down on top of them. It's so heartbreaking and so sad. It always makes me cry. And then that moment where Dawn throws her arms around Buffy and says, you're home, you know? And then Buffy is just staring. I mean, oh my God, it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, because Buffy, that whole scene on the tower is so difficult to watch because Buffy is clearly trying to make some kind of sense of what has happened and where she is. And she's had to dig out of her own grave, which, I mean, we know from nightmares that being buried alive is one of Buffy's fears. And then that comes true in a sense. I mean, not entirely, but she's had this, like, she claws her way out of her grave. And then Sunnydale is literally on fire. And she sees the tower and climbs it and is standing on that same spot. And it's like the mental process that's happening for her there. She's trying to make sense of everything that's happened. I mean, we know because we see some POV shots from Buffy that she is literally not seeing clearly. After she's brought back.
You know, after being like, you know, if I sleep in my contacts, they get dry. I wake up in the morning, my vision is a little blurry. I can't even imagine being dead for 3 months, what that would do. You know, takes a little while to get all those tear ducts moving, right?
So while she's walking around Sunnydale, her vision is partially blurred, but when she's standing on the tower, on the spot where the portal was, and looking down at the spot where the portal was, that POV shot is completely clear. And she says that she's kind of piecing it all together, like it was so clear that moment, that decision to save Dawn and the world by jumping off the tower. It's rough because she knows that she had this clarity and this understanding and this like sense of completion in a way, you know, when she says to Dawn at the end of season 5, like, this is the work I have to do.
Right.
She it's like she figures out what it means to be called to be the Slayer the way she is. And she achieves that in a strange way. And then it's all reversed. And she doesn't know where she is or why she is or even what has happened. We know.
Right.
We all know what's happened. But she has just woken up in a coffin. And this is where she feels compelled to return. It's a lot. It's a lot.
It is. I mean, it's so huge and it's so powerful. And everything, of course, is falling down because this isn't the same moment. You can't recreate it. You can't go back, you know, like you are where you are. And even if it's in the same place, it's not the same thing, you know? But I love this moment when she looks at Dawn and she says, is this hell? Right? Because that's the only thing that she can think about. That's the only context that she can put this in, this experience, right? Of coming back, everything's on fire. There are these demons who are way scarier than the demons she left behind. You know, the demons that she jumped through, you know, a hell dimension in order to like save the world from, you know. If you compare Glory's minions to these guys, this biker gang, like that's not even, they're not even in the same territory.
They're
like,
almost cuddly compared to this biker gang.
They're super cuddly compared to the biker demons. But when she asked this question, like, is this hell? You know, my first response is, well, it's not hell. You know?
Right.
I mean, and when you start thinking about it, like I started thinking about this question, like, is this hell? Is that what the experience of adulthood is? You know? There's this idea that hell isn't a literal place or a dimension, but rather something that we create around us that we carry within us, you know? And the question is that what adulthood is? Like when I was talking about coming of age stories before, that we usually have this line as being, you know, like when somebody has sex or whatever, or falls in love, that's coming of age. But coming of age, I mean, is it really when you step over that line between knowing and not knowing, you know, between not feeling responsible for anything and feeling responsible for everything, you know? Does this crossing over into adulthood, into hell, happen when we make our first bad choice, you know, when we carry in our hearts the consequences of that choice? Did it start for Buffy when she slept with Angel and he turned bad? She was holding herself responsible for something that was absolutely not her fault, but she felt the consequences of that choice, you know? So here's this idea, right? That we custom build our own demons, our own hells, and we carry them around with us every day. And we just kind of live in it, you know? And I think that's how Buffy works as a metaphor, because metaphorically, we are all Buffy, you know, just slaying our demons one by one. But there are hordes of them, and there are different types, different damage and baggage and pain, and we fight them and fight them and fight them, but they just keep coming. And, you know, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, is that if you're taking this idea, you know, this hell idea, that hell is something that we carry with us, that we create, you know, do we keep creating it every day? Do we keep calling these demons to us as we create them? Every time we make a choice that we regret, every time someone does something to us that shows us their darkness and we take that darkness into ourselves, you know, I'm not blaming the victim here, but I'm just like asking the question and sort of exploring this idea, this metaphor, you know. We're in the grown-up part of Buffy now, and I think this is where we start asking those really complicated sort of grown-up questions. And so if we have this idea that like our demons are created when we are hurt, when we are damaged, we touch darkness either through our own hubris or because we're dragged into it by somebody else. But once we look into the abyss, it looks back into us, and from there, we just have demons, you know? They follow us in shadow, right? They can't step into the sunlight, but we can't always be in sunlight. The sun goes down, the night comes, and the demons find us, and they whisper things that probably aren't true, but they make us believe them, you know? So we fight them one by one. Sometimes we win, and we know that they're lying to us, and sometimes we lose, and we believe them. But then we sleep and we wake up and we see the sun and we go on for another day. But they're always there, you know, in the dark, waiting for us to let our guard down so that they can have, what was the Spike said, one very good day. They wait for a weak moment. They start to whisper at us again. They make us believe them again. So you think about that as this endless Sisyphusian cycle, right? You know, what's the point? Even if we kill one demon, we're just going to make another one, a stronger one, a more convincing one. And then they come in when we invite them, right? So it's us creating our hells, creating our demons, and inviting them in. And I just think it's an interesting question. I don't know how I feel about it, but I think it's an interesting question when you talk about the metaphor of season 6. In the Angel episode Epiphany in Angel season 2, Angel says that if nothing we do matters, all that matters is what we do. And I love that. I hold on to that. That is central to kind of like how I see the world. But in Gingerbread, Angel tells Buffy that we fight because there are things worth fighting for. And in Amends, Buffy tells Angel that fighting is hard and it's painful and it's every day, but it's what we have to do. And I think that this is some part of the appeal of Buffy as a show, that it's part of why we watch Buffy. Because Buffy reminds us that things get dark, things get lost, we get lost. But we fight because there are things worth fighting for. We are fighting for. So is this hell? Maybe, you know, sometimes, but not always, right? Some days we walk into the sunlight and it's beautiful and the demons can't touch us there. And that's worth fighting for. And that's what you keep fighting. That's why you keep doing it. That's why you keep fighting. So I find it interesting because is this hell? Is such an interesting question. And I think probably one that most of us who have like at least transitioned over into adulthood have asked maybe once or twice, you know?
Yeah.
But it's an interesting kind of way of looking at what Buffy is and what Buffy does. I don't know. Just a question. I don't know.
Is this hell? Is the question that we're going to continue to ask throughout the season.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that line is that she is asking, like, literally, is this hell? Like, is this the place?
Yeah.
Like, how is that where I am now? Because I was somewhere else.
Yeah.
And now where I am is not that.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting view of hell, that hell is something that we carry with us. I tend to think of hell more as the state of being separated from the divine, which arguably is exactly where Buffy is.
Yeah.
She has been ripped away from that divinity that she, I don't want to say achieves by sacrificing herself, because that is incredibly loaded sounding.
Yeah.
But that sense, the sense of wholeness and completion that she has in that moment of clarity when she realizes her gift, right? That is divinity for Buffy.
Yeah. The clarity, right?
Yeah. That moment of holiness has been taken away from her when she's brought back. So to ask, is this hell? I think fits really nicely with, is this, have I been completely removed from the clarity that I thought I had?
Yeah, that's so interesting, because my whole run on Is This Hell, the idea that there was a divinity, not even on the table. Like, not even, didn't even consider it. That there is divinity, the divinity exists, you know, like the best we can get is walking into the sunlight where the demons can't get us. So I think that possibly my worldview might be a little bit darker than yours. So I'm glad you're here.
Or
to, like,
just,
bring that
you
in.
know, like more agnostic. I'm not sure. Like gets, as we move forward with the series, I think the series gets less agnostic.
Ooh,
arguably.
Interesting.
Maybe? I don't know. I will be interested to kind of, that's another thing that I'm going to keep an eye on.
Oh, I like it. I like having that discussion.
Kind of a growing, like a agnostic theism almost.
Yeah.
Like there is a God, but shrug, like, is kind of where
I mean, and over in Angel, which is of course a, you know, cousin universe, right? You know, we have the powers that be that are supposed to be quote unquote good or whatever, but I don't think so. Like, there are interesting questions about the absence. Like, we show the physical presence of evil and the manifestations of evil, which are demons, right? You know?
Yeah.
We don't really show a physical manifestation of divinity, you know, aside from, you know, we've got the monks, which presumably are worshiping something. We have Glory, who is a god, but she's evil, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the theism here, you know, the philosophy behind that is going to be really, really interesting to kind of parse out. I'm looking forward to thinking about it in those terms, because that is so interesting. Although I do have one quick question. This is just like a nitpick, you know, but I'm not above it. Right. Tara says Mercury's in retrograde. And I'm like, is Mercury in retrograde like really a good time to bring back the dead, considering that I'm not supposed to buy a new toaster oven during Mercury in retrograde? Like, you know what I'm saying?
When Mercury is in retrograde, that's when you want to like really like double secret confirm that all of your files are recording and like maybe not respond to that email. Like
because it fucks with you. And like Mercury in retrograde feels like Mercury in retrograde is the like astrological version of a trickster. Right? You know, they're just coming in to like fuck with you. And
Mercury is about communication, which is a weird, like, I don't know. That feels like a weird thing to bring into the
right.
Death
it feels
and
like
rebirth.
somebody picked it up as like, oh, this is a thing that people say without knowing why people talk about Mercury in retrograde.
Right.
Yeah.
if things are kind of wonky, we're just going to blame Mercury being in retrograde.
Well, we're just going to say Mercury in retrograde because it sounds like a thing, but without having any knowledge of it. And so it threw me out because I'm like, oh, Tara would know. Tara would know. You don't do shit when Mercury's in retrograde. You stay home. You certainly do not raise the goddamn dead when Mercury's in retrograde. But
I mean,
yeah, and that's
probably
funny
not.
I think probably not. But of course, like, I say that as somebody who, like, I don't really believe in it. I find astrology interesting and fun, but I don't really like believe in it at all. Although I will say there have been times where things have been getting like really, really messed up, where everything goes wrong, and I'm like, oh, I wonder, and I do a little search as Mercury in retrograde, and yep, yes, it is. So I don't know, but I found that kind of interesting. Also, like, I do have a question, like, if you want to keep Buffy's death, you know, super low key, like, maybe don't have a gravestone like engraved and placed in the middle of the woods where people might, you know, like, find it or whatever, because the bikers who were in town, right, where all the fun is, right, are now randomly biking through the forest and come across the sacred circle and whatever. Like, why?
Sunnydale is whatever shape you need it to be for the story you want to tell. Like, that's
right.
really...
I'm just saying, if the random bikers having a party in the alleys and lighting fires in garbage cans, right, are going to also bike through the forest, like, maybe wherever you put Buffy's little gravestone, you might want to keep that quiet. You know, like, you might not want.
Yeah.
And also, the dude who engraved it, you know, I mean, maybe he doesn't know who Buffy is, but still, like, I don't know. It felt a little weird to me. Although I did appreciate the Buffy gravestone. She saved the world a lot. It's always kind of nice.
She saved the world a lot. Yeah, because what else are you going to say?
I know.
It's perfect.
So, Noelle, what are you wearing?
Okay, you mentioned the vampire. And his t-shirt.
Oh, yes.
His Hanson t-shirt.
Yes. Bop, baby.
And I just want to, like, I love that as a wardrobe choice on a number of levels. I love it. Yeah. I love that vampires clearly bring some of their human personality along with them, right, as vampires.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But also, you know, as you were talking about this transition from kind of like goofy demons to
serious, frightening demons.
Yeah, to like serious, scary, hyper masculine demons. I mean, what is more like hyper toxic masculine than a biker gang with face tattoos?
Yeah,
like, that's... We're pulling on some, like,
face mutilation. I mean, I don't think that those like hooks and leather straps.
Yeah, the hooks are an interesting
biologically
choice, aren't they?
generated. Like, that's stuff that they do, and all the piercings. And piercings are fine. Piercings are fine. But like the leather straps with the hooks into their flesh that look torturous on their own, like, that's... You know, that's something that you choose. I don't think demons are like born with leather straps and metal hooked into their face. So yeah, it's weird.
It's clearly an aesthetic choice they make. It's clearly part of their demon aesthetic.
Yeah.
So the contrast between goofy vampires and as summed up by this one kind of, I don't know. He's just not that impressive as vampires go.
He's Jonah Hill. If Jonah Hill were a vampire, right? That's who this guy would be. And I liked him. I thought he was funny. I thought he was cute. You know,
he's great.
He was adorable. But yeah, like when our demon vampire takes him by the neck and pops his head off, you know, like he's a Pez dispenser.
Yeah.
Then you know that we're transitioning out of one space and into another space. And man, that's dark.
Yeah. We're out of boy band space and into biker gang space.
Yes.
And
yes, we are.
I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
But that's just like, I mean, wardrobe. I love you so much.
I know that detail, the Hanson t-shirt. When you say vampire in a Hanson t-shirt, that's everything you need to know. Like,
Right.
that's the
Yes.
power of one little detail. Whenever I teach writing, I always talk about the power of specificity. That is
Yep.
exactly what I'm talking about. That one really well-chosen detail can tell you almost everything you need to know about a character.
Do you want to take us into girl power, Lani?
Oh, not with a girl power, babe.
I do want to take us into girl power. So I picked out a few things, a few elements of girl power that I thought were really present in this episode. We have Willow, of course, doing her Willow thing, taking everything Osiris wants to deal out and being like, is that all you got? You know? So yeah, I mean, maybe what she's doing is technically, you know, morally, ethically, like, wrong. Sure. But she's tough and she can take a hit. And that is unbelievable to see her do that and then bounce back and be in charge of the gang, you know? All of that I think is really great. I love Tara. And then of course, here's Willow's badass, tough, I will cut a bitch magic, right? And
Yup.
then we have Tara sending the Tinkerbell light.
Yeah.
You know, and then Willow instantly knowing what it is. And we have this thing where she sends me a light and I find her. And then I got so lost, but I found you.
Yep.
It just brings back to that. So I love that. Tara burying an axe in the back of a biker demon. Hell fucking yeah. And saving Willow. I love that. I think that that's incredible. And then we've got Dawn climbing up the rickety dimensional diving board to save Buffy. That also is pretty badass. And once again, I would like to say we're having another badass moment from Dawn. I love Dawn. I know a lot of people don't like her. I swear, the more time I spend with her, the more I actually like her.
Yeah. Yeah, she holds it together really well too.
Mm-hmm.
That whole scene at
Yeah.
the top of the tower,
Mm-hmm.
she is really like she is in all of the feelings.
Yeah.
You know, that Buffy's not the only one who had a big moment at the top of that tower. I mean,
Right,
Dawn is
Mm-hmm.
reliving this horrible moment
Yeah.
and still managing to keep her calm enough to try to talk Buffy over to her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's impressive.
Yeah.
It really is.
Dawn is
I love
very
Dawn.
impressive. She is really fantastic. All right. So what's your favorite part of bargaining parts 1 and 2?
Oh my God. I mean, I talked about my favorite parts aesthetically, which of course are like Willow and her maybe problematic, definitely problematic magic.
Yeah.
But in terms of just like delight, it's Tara with her first and I think only demon kill.
Right.
Nobody messes with my girl.
Oh, man.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody messes with my girl. That's right.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking badass. I love that moment.
What about you? What's your favorite part?
I love Dawn and Buffy at the end when Dawn is talking to Buffy and bringing her back and reconnecting her to her life as much as she can in this moment of severe trauma. You know, she reaches out and she is the thing that Buffy responds to. You know, the first thing that Buffy responds to is the demons when they're threatening, you know, the Scooby Gang, and then she fights, right? So that is her Slayer instinct, you know, kicking in. But this is her human half kicking in. This is her human part that is responding to her sister and her sister needing her. And even though, you know, when they're on the ground and Dawn is hugging her, we see this blank look from Buffy. You know, it is still, she's not entirely there yet, but she's there enough because of her love of Dawn. And I love that. It makes me cry every time. All right, if you enjoyed this conversation, would like to join in, connect with the show on Twitter, follow @Chipperish, and use the hashtag StillPretty.
This episode of Still Pretty was brought to you by the Chipperish media producers who support us on Patreon at the power producer level. These people are the reason why Still Pretty is coming to you free and ad-free right now, so thank you to our September producers. And this week's special message for our power producers: let's fly, pigeon.
To find out how you too can support Chipperish Media, visit patreon.com/Chipperish. Other ways to show your support: write a great review on Apple Podcasts, tell your friends about the show, or put marzipan in your pie plate, bingo.
We will be back next time with Afterlife, the 3rd episode of season 6. Until then, If we want her to be exactly, she'll never be exactly, I know the only really real Buffy is really Buffy, and she's gone who?